Hello and welcome to the Silent Evil Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I am Cameron.
And we got this fun little indie game that we're going to give the old college try to, or that we did give the college try to. And that is Post-Trauma. And now it came out a handful of weeks ago by now, and we've been kind of slowly trucking through it in the background and whatnot. And finally got to this podcast here. And it's not that it's the world's longest game. It wasn't like Conscript that kind of threw you a curveball at how long that game actually was. 100%. This one kind of ran at that, standard survival horror length. I don't know, give or take 6 or 7 hours maybe, at the end of the day. But it's an interesting one. It kind of has that Silent Hill, vibe for sure. More than anything else, I would say, over all other kinds of survival horrors. But it also has a lot of kind of goofs and interesting, missteps, I think, that kind of happen in it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think that this game, as a basic overlay, as an introduction, is a totally cool, psychological horror game. I wouldn't even put it in survival horror. I think that this is way more a Silent Hill style game as compared to a Resident Evil. There's survival horror mechanics in the game. There's some light inventory stuff and things like that. But I think in general, it leans way more into the psychological, horror and thriller side of more or less exactly what Silent Hill is, So for that reason alone, I personally, I enjoyed the game, but I 100% agree with you in the fact that this game has some missteps. It has some problems, So
well, and it reminds me, I kind of wanted to see what more these guys did, because it seems like it's an overly, almost too ambitious indie project. Mm-hmm. It's one of those ones where they felt like they're trying to make a AAA title to go along with the Silent Hill 2 remake, yep. But with the indie shortcuts and just the presentation and so on like that, it feels like it's kind of one of those ones maybe you should have pumped it back a bit and made it feel almost more try to make it a PS2 style horror game, or give it that. Because a lot of times those are the ones that sort of pan out well, I notice, are the ones that where they make the game in an old school retro look. I'll say something like Crow Country, yeah. Or there's another one that I know I've always told you about, but Alyssa, that mm-hmm. one, it looks like a 1996 survival horror game. And I think because of that, it kind of handles pretty darn well. Where this one here, at first glance, it looks like it's trying to fit alongside, I would almost say, the Alone in the Dark remake or the Resident Evil 2 one and the Silent Hill one. But then you kind of play it and you're like, oh, it's a little bit I don't know, a little bit broken. Not saying that it has interesting elements, and not saying that there isn't a cool story and so on like that, even though the story is a little bit complex. It kind of took a little bit more deep diving to figure that one out. But But yeah, it's just one of those ones. It's clunky. I think that's the biggest thing I kind of have to say about it. The first and foremost, when you're playing a survival horror game, it has the camera angles, which is cool, but they decided first to give it omnidirectional controls, mm-hmm. which don't work with camera angles. There's a reason why tank controls were created, and they were to go with that style of camera angles, because when you run and the camera changes, well, now the camera's looking a different way, so now your joystick technically changes. But if you have tank controls, forward is always forward.
Yep. And that was one of the very first things I noticed in the game too, is very beautiful graphics. Sound design is off the wall. Atmosphere is just oozing, literally all over the place. But yeah, it's controls. I really struggled with it for a good long while. It took me until about midway through Act 2 to finally be okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this. And that far into the game, and again, this is a pretty short game, but that far into the game to finally get used to controls and recognizing that camera shift is going to happen here pretty soon. I may not know the exact frame, but at least I know it's coming, and then from there, being able to make adjustments on the fly. A lot of my traversal was moving. Oh, camera changes. Just let go of the controls for a second. Just let Roman stand still. Okay, now I know which direction I need to put him in or whatever. Now the game has, if you're pointing in one direction, you have a camera angle that's very specific, and you're pulling the say down on the controller or whatever. When the camera angle switches to the next scene or whatever, if you're continually holding down, Roman's going to keep walking in that direction, which is cool. Awesome. You know, badass. But the moment you make any micro adjustment, because your brain is trying to process what you're seeing, you know, and camera change, like, oh, he needs to move this way. Any movement off of that dead center, exactly where you were as you were moving into that scene, completely screws the game up. Like, and thank God this game has more exploration than anything, because if this game had a heavy combat emphasis, I probably wouldn't have finished it. No way.
Yeah, forget it. Well, and it's I remember when it was when they did the Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 0, like the remasters or whatnot on PS3 and PS4 and so on. And they put those Omni controls in there. And I just remember turning them on. I was like, I just want to see what this is like for a split second. And that was the first time I realized, I'm like, oh, this doesn't work at all. Like, there's a 100% reason why you have to have tank controls, because that omnidirection thing's goofy. And as I said, like, I got kind of used to it enough to get through this entire game for post-trauma with the straight, you just let go of the joystick and then you reevaluate. And, and once you're halfway into the game, it's like you kind of go, okay, this is just how the game plays, whatever, I can go with it. They did try to put tank controls in there with an update. And I tried those out, and strangely enough, I don't know how you mess up tank controls, but they were god awful. Like they wouldn't, kind of act right, and it was weird. And I don't even know what to more say about it. It was like one of those ones you thought it was just going to play totally fine. I'm like, cool, this is it. That's the little fix that they needed, and then. Yeah, they were almost even worse. Like they just were, I don't know, maybe they got better as time went on, but I just never.
Well, see that was the whole thing. So like early on in this game, you and I were texting, and that was a very first thing both of us were just like, dude, what are with these controls? Like, why is it like this? And then I remember like a handful of days post launch, like I just randomly saw that Steam was updating, and I was like, oh shoot, there's an update. Let's see what that is. And I noticed the bullet point tank controls, and I remember getting like super excited and being like, Spencer's thinking they're adding it, dude, like hell yeah, like we were just talking about this. And then you go and use it and you play it, and then you give me back your feedback, because I hadn't tried it at that point, and I still haven't to this day. Based off your feedback, you're like, yeah, it sucks. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it was so bad I had to go back to the omnidirectional ones because they were way better.
Yeah,
by comparison.
Yeah.
But that's always a weird thing to me, is when people make, in a sense, retro style games, but they don't necessarily get the retro style controls dialed in. It's one of the biggest ones that just it frustrates me more than anything else is if I get a first person shooter, especially those retro ones, because I'm a sucker for any of those. I don't like to use the word boomer shooter, because that to me, I'm like, whoa, that makes it sound like it was made for boomers. And let's be honest, no boomer wanted you to play those games. So I think I think that's just like a young person's way of being like, it's an old person shooter, but it's like, whoa, wrong generation there. But is if they don't put inverted controls in there. And I've had a few of those games where I bought them like day one on Steam and whatnot, and or even like I bought them on like Switch or like Xbox and something like that. It's like, dude, there's no inverted controls for a game that has a 1996 look. Like, what are you thinking? And I've literally had to send those. I'm like, I'll find them on Twitter or something like that. Be like, yo, you got to fix this. You know what I mean? Like, there is no way. And lo and behold, every game I've ever had, they always have fixed it. But it's still kind of, to me, I feel like that's pretty bad to not have that initially.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like not having the tank controls in a survival horror game that has camera angles like that. Yeah. I know it's like, it makes me kind of wonder, have these guys really played that many survival horror games in their entire life? Or have like, did they get into it like, Xbox 360 and up like time period?
Right. Well, I think you nailed it on the head. I think the the mirroring of a game like Bluebird Team's, Silent Hill 2 remake and whatnot. It has like the tone and aesthetic of something like that, because this is using Unreal Engine. So like graphically, it looks really good. Like it's definitely an indie game for sure. Like you can tell that it wasn't like, it's rough around the edges, but for good reason, in my opinion, because it totally melds into the theme of this game. And so I think that, like with controls, I think that we should touch on camera in general, because in 95% of the cases in this game, the camera is fantastic. I love the dynamic movement. I love the framing of certain shots and whatnot, especially when it comes into puzzles. So like I feel that the way that like Roman moves alongside this camera, especially the moving long hallway draws and whatnot, and like the twist, the like slow, like panning and like twisting of the camera and whatnot, like it really got my head like physically like turning, because like normally there would be like one example is like a light at the end of this this really long hallway or whatever. And like viewing that and like walking towards it or whatever, and the camera's like slowly starting to twist and turn and whatnot, and like that combined with like the dark tone, these like really fleshy like vine looking things, like running up and down the hallways and stuff, and just like just all of it like tonally is so well done. I thought it was so good.
Yeah, no, I think that the atmosphere in here, and that's the thing about this game. There actually is a lot of great stuff in it. I know it made it feel like we went on a tyrant on like the controls right off the bat, but that's a big deal because that's just the first thing you kind of feel when you play a game is how well does it control, But the atmosphere is really cool. And I will say, I actually think that Roman is actually one of the coolest kind of survival horror characters because I just love the fact that you have this middle-aged, kind of overweight guy. He's working a blue collar job, and it's just, I feel like I've never technically really seen that. I mean, you could kind of say, I guess, what's his name in Silent Hill 1 is, middle aged with a daughter and everything like that. So it's in that kind of vibe. But this one just feels like here's this guy who he literally drives a subway train in Japan and whatnot, and he has no idea really how he got here. And even as like the viewer, you're never really 100% too sure. There's a lot of open-ended questions, and it makes you kind of, we'll get to that as that goes on. But I just felt like that's cool. That's a kind of character. Because mostly in a survival horror game, you either get one, it's either you're a police officer or military type person, all a Resident Evil, or even Alone in the Dark because you're an investigator. Or you do have the kind of like the Silent Hill style where it's generally like someone looking for a family member or something like that. And a lot of times, for the most part, they're female characters is mostly what it is in like 80% of probably survival horror games. So the fact that you have a middle-aged, slightly overweight, older guy, blue collar, I just thought that was great. Like I thought Roman, he was a cool guy, and I wanted to see how he was going to go through this whole thing.
Yep. No, I fully agree with that sentiment as well. I was kind of like taken back by that character just in general, just because it's exactly what you're just saying. You don't see that in survival horror. You don't see that in well, like you said, like Silent Hill, like maybe the exception to that, but in general, I mean, like, you're big badass military guys. You're, like RPD, or, like a Dino Crisis, stuff like that, I mean, like, everything's like that. But no,
or you're a little Asian girl with a camera, like Fatal Frame. right. And this game does have some. I was going to comment on that too. This game has some like crazy, like not in terms of like the camera obscura and taking pictures of ghosts like type stuff, but like there's some tonal stuff, especially in the school portion of this game, that like just mirrors Fatal Frame for me. Like it really, really got me thinking that way. But no, I mean, like, I think Roman in general is a very, very cool character. I think this is just a general statement with voice acting in general. I don't think the person they chose for this character fits Roman per se. Like, he's like this, like, I don't know, everything's in English, but it's very like Japanese style, like he just has this like really thick accent that just doesn't work for me. It's like, if you're going to be Roman and, like whatever, like, I mean, just don't have like this, like what sounded like a forced, Japanese accent, like, so, and sometimes those ones like, in an indie game, I'll give them always a little bit of a pass, because probably they probably just got their uncle to do the voice. What I mean? Like you never know exactly who they really kind of did get there. But I think the guy carried good enough. He seemed like he was lost and stuff, and I kind of liked a little bit of the accent and everything like that there too. Just because it is that one where you're like everything's got sort of this like like you're in a demonic Japanese kind of area. Yeah. Though the game I think is made by almost like Europeans, if I'm not mistaken, from the credits.
Spanish.
Yeah, Spanish. So you kind of got a mixed match kind of vibe going on there. But the fact that they just kind of drop you into this, I mean, literally the first scene is actually not Roman because there's the other dude, Carlos, and the very, very beginning, like, you know, I guess you would say it's like level 1, but it's not really even a level. It's more like a glorified cutscene.
Yeah, it's
this dude walks up on this guy in like a prison cell or a cage or whatnot, and then the guy's down there like cowering, and he's like, one more time or whatever, and shoots him in the head, and you're like, the hell's going on here? Like, it's so early that you're like, okay, whatever, sure, carry on.
Yeah, no, because that scene in general, just like to be the very start of the game. So it's like black screen, whatever. You wake up in first person into this, and all you can really tell is that this person's name is Carlos because of the dialogue that shows up on the screen or whatever, and he says what he says. Like Spence said, there's this like basically like naked dude, like just like sitting on the floor inside of a cell or whatever. And yeah, you walk up, you say your couple like one-liners or whatever, you put a gun to this thing's head, and then it just sits there, and it's just like you as the player, it's just like click left, left click or whatever, to pull the trigger. And I sat there and like waited for like a good like 30 seconds, like, is something else gonna happen, or is this what I have to? Nope, this is what you have to do. Bam, you pull that trigger, everything fades to black, and then bam, you wake up as Roman in the middle of this train, in the middle of like this very like gloomy atmosphere and whatnot. And and it's like the start of the game, basically. It's just like a very shocking, like, first image,
Yeah, as I said, it comes around kind of later on. That scene makes more sense, or just as much sense as it can make later down the line. But at first, yeah, you're just like, oh, okay, and then you really have no idea what's going on. Even as Roman's confused too, and you're just running around this subway train. And I will say, like right off the bat, because this is where you technically start playing, is it? I guess in that second part when you're Roman, is you have an initial puzzle. And this puzzle kind of almost like lets you know kind of how the rest of the game's going to play puzzle wise. And this game's definitely way heavier puzzle than anything else. Once again, a la Silent Hill. But what I liked about it is you just got to get this, combo code to unlock this door, but it gave you multiple hints, which I felt like I've never actually seen a survival horror game that like they gave you like multiple. You could almost have a few different ways you could kind of figure out the clues to it, because there was some graffiti on the side of on the walls of the train that kind of gave you codes of like, if I remember correctly, it's been a moment since I was at that one. It was like a triangle, square, circle type thing. You had to find the number that go along with it. And so there would be some graffiti that was sprayed alongside there. There was a couple notes that you could read alongside there that might give you some more. And then at the far end, there was a couple other sections, but you didn't necessarily need to get all of them to unlock that door. You could just find a few of them, and that would be just enough that you needed.
Yep. Yeah, so my first 45 minutes of play was in that damn train. It took me quite a while to like fully comprehend and understand that, like, yeah, this game is totally about its environment. You have to look at everything. Anything that like just seems slightly out of place or whatever, it's a very gray environment inside that train and whatnot. But you see something like a yellow or a red or a, like some kind of like bright, outstanding color or whatever, where in most games you would just run past that as just a piece of graffiti on the wall. But in this game, it's just like, no, you have to really pay attention to stuff like that. One comment that I will make that I found hilarious, because I had to look this up after the fact. So in that train, I noticed, because once I recognized that like, oh, symbol means number, which means code, or whatever. So I'm really starting to look at things. I looked at a couple of the posters in that game and just immediately recognized like, oh, that's AI generated, like in real life, like the artist like had that AI generated or whatever. So I immediately went to the community forums in Steam and started to look and just see what people were talking about in the game, because it had just came out like 2 or 3 days prior. And there was a huge thread about, AI generated, stuff. And like people like, oh, this game's garbage and it's slop because this is what the artists are doing and whatnot. No. That's not how I feel about this, dude, because of the way the psychological side of things. Roman being in this weird place, he has no idea where he is and whatnot. And like walking by the random image of like the poster that's on the wall in the train car or whatever, and it being like a, not having like spelling properly and like, like fingers, like hands having like 6 fingers and things like that, like it totally plays into that psychological horror of like your mind warping, like you're not really sure like what's reality versus what isn't. And again, tonally, the way that plays into the tone of this game is like so good, because that lasts throughout the whole experience. You know, you see stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
No, I do think that's pretty neat too, and it's one of those ones where it works in this way. And that's another one too. Realistically, I'm not going to give any like indie game crap about using any AI generated stuff, anyways. You know, for the fact that like that they already got to cut corners here and there, and you got stuff to get done, and if it's not going to be done fast enough that way. But it works in its advantage just the way it's set up in this game, and I think that is kind of cool too, and just the little extra details that are there throughout it. But yeah, that's that kind of like, it's like, I don't want to say even with that initial puzzle, I think I got like 3 out of the 4, but then you could just kind of bully your way through the because it's like, okay, it's only, it's a 5-digit combination. Well, if I have 3 of them out of 5, the next 2 are going to be pretty easy to figure out. It won't take me that long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, like, this is where so once we get through this and we're like actually like dumped into the train station more or less. And this is like the very first well, I guess we have to get the crowbar first or whatever, but you start to acquire like items, at this point. And this is where I'd say like the game totally turns into something like a Resident Evil, where it's like, oh, key item here to open this thing, so I can open this thing, so I can open this door and get this next key item, and blah blah blah. So there's quite a bit of that in the game, but I think that the way that it does its puzzles is very thought-provoking and challenging. It really took me a while to understand some of these puzzles, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, no, the puzzles themselves, they definitely got a little bit of like, so sometimes you're sitting there just really trying to figure it out. But I will also say at the same time, I give it kind of credit that most of these puzzles too, like the stuff you need is generally in that vicinity. It's not like you have to go to the clear other side of the map to find one little thing that goes to here and there. I'm kind of like, because that's one of those things that's always kind of like can throw it off. It's like, well, now I have to go search for this and that. Where a lot of times, like a lot of the clues that you need for it are kind of there. I mean, at least there's some of the ones you have to go to a few, like when you're in the school and things like that, you have to go to a couple of different rooms and so on like that, and really pull out like the physical pen and paper to kind of like write down what you found in each one. But they were kind of neat ones, and they were pretty fun. And like, even if like you only got like half of it, like you could still kind of partially guess and sort of figure out like the last part you needed a lot of times. It wasn't like some of those games where it's like, you don't know the answer or whatever. So, let me just give it the old guess then.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Or like that stupid lock in like conscript or whatever at the very end, where you had all the stupid symbols that your brother left on it and stuff like that. There's like no way you're gonna be able to bully yourself through that one. Randomly generated too, just to top it off.
yeah, exactly. So like I thought that it pretty much, like, I'm just gonna say a general statement in terms of all the environments and places we go to in this game and whatnot. Totally like play into one of the reviews that I watched afterwards, like totally nailed it on the head, in that these are types of places where if trauma is going to happen, these are the types of places they happen at. And this is police stations and train stations and hospitals and schools and like things like that. So like you waking up in the train, going through that puzzle of getting out of the train, all of a sudden you're in the train station and whatnot. And really, as the player and as Roman himself in game, like really has no idea what is going on at this point. You're just in this really screwed up environment that, again, is very dark and gloomy and like very, I don't know, organic and fleshy. There's just like these like random like tendrils of vines that are like sprawling through these like long hallways and things, and like everything kind of has this like ooziness to it, where everything's like super wet and breathing, and like just the way that they pulled off their environmental design was like so good. Like I really enjoyed that facet of the game.
Oh, yeah, so there's all these eyes that are looking at you from so many different like things, like whether they're just painted on the wall or whether they come from those like kind of oozy tentacle kind of like plant like feeling monsters. And
there's a huge sense of unease in the game too, that I think it is like exemplified by just the random. I mean, it's just a creepy thing in general, but just mannequins. Like there are just mannequins everywhere in this game. most of which none of them do anything. They're just there for tone, and it's just creepy because you as a player are walking by the thing that you've walked past a good 3 or 4 times now, and you just like every time you walk past the mannequin sitting on the bench in the train station, you're just like, one of these times that thing's gonna jump out at me, and it never does. But like, you always have that sense of unease. So
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to think. There's one game where like there is these like mannequins in it, and I want to say it's one of those things that like if you like turn your back on it, it walks closer to you, kind of like Boo and like Super Mario. But I cannot think what the heck that game is.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I started thinking about that. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that you think's going to come to life, and it never does. But it almost gives you that extra bit of dread that it's like at some point I might come back. I don't know. Who knows? Each time I come through this room, is it going to be different? What's going to happen?
Yep. Yeah, so and again, like throughout this train station, like we get the crowbar. The crowbar helps us open a door that we came across earlier that we couldn't open. Now we can pry the thing open and like walk through and stuff. It's very, very gamey, and like I wouldn't even say gamey. It's like it works within the world, within the environment that it's built for. But this game doesn't do anything like that really stood out to me, that's like, oh, that's unique, like that's a thing, I felt that this game was very it took the easy route, but I think that a culmination of a lot of different things of the game makes it pretty good.
Yeah, no, and I'll say that because it's one of those ones when I think of generally a good indie game is they have to do one of two things for the most part. They either have to give you something you'd never seen before, and you're like, whoa, that's a cool idea. That's a real thing, or like fresh way to go about it. Or they got to take an idea that maybe a big company has already used, but they didn't go far enough with it, or they're going to combine a couple of things together with it too. And once again, I'm just going to use Conscript as the example since that was one of the last indie ones we kind of did, where it took the thing where it's like, okay, it's Resident Evil 4, but we're throwing a World War I theme onto it, giving it kind of like the dark Silent Hill, like overtone kind of vibes, and it plays like Metal Gear. The original.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you had so many things going on together, it made it feel like it was a brand new, fresh game. Where this one here kind of just feels like I hate to start saying it feels like a Silent Hill knockoff.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And the thing about it is, even though there's cool stuff in it, it is one of those ones that I do feel it's kind of a hard game to really even recommend to somebody unless you're somebody, for the person who's played every Silent Hill game and needs another one. Because for the most part, if somebody just hadn't played a whole lot of Silent Hills, you would just recommend them that instead. You'd be like, just play Silent Hill. You know what I mean? Not saying that this thing doesn't have some cool stuff going on to it, but there's nothing that's going to radically change you. And if you're especially not like that used to survival horrors, anyways, it might kind of turn you off because of its clunkiness. Yep.
And I think that it's clunkiness in design too. Again, whether or not it was intentional is kind of besides the point. I think it totally works here because you are playing as a 57-year-old man that's a train conductor in this weird random place. Your controls are screwed up. You can't attack very well. Like you're wildly swinging, objects around like crowbars and sledgehammers and shit. Yeah, sure, you can get some guns in the game and whatnot, but it's wildly inaccurate. It's hard to tell what the hell you're even shooting at and things like, all of it combined. Again, if I were to dissect this game into individual slices, like you would think that this is an awful game, but it's more of a sum of all of its parts. I think that it all comes together in some weird amalgamation sense to where it actually is like fairly decent. I'm with you. Like I wouldn't recommend this to probably a lot of people, but you got to spare $15 and 6 hours of your time and you want to go on like a wild ride, adventure with, just psychological horror in general. Like, I think this is a totally cool game, like there's some cool stuff in here. And well, after the fact, in doing my research and whatnot, I think that I've put together the pieces of like what's happening in this game, and I'm really curious to hear like what your research and your thoughts are, because this is the type of game that like you can't pin down to a very specific thing in terms of its story and narrative. Like I think it's all up to interpretation of the player, how you perceive things, what your thoughts are on trauma in general and how people deal with trauma. And I really, really enjoyed that facet of the game. It's a thought-provoking experience for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And because the fact that there's sort of, in a sense, there's three characters in the game. I mean, Roman is definitely our main character, but there's two other ones. Of course, we have Carlos that we've kind of briefly touched on before, and it's weird because his segments they're all in first person whenever you play as him. And I guess there's only about three if you count the first one, but technically two.
Yeah.
And he's in the police station, and a lot of the stuff in here is this trauma that each one of these characters kind of has. And there's a little bit of a repeat, like a Run Lola Run type thing, because when you see Carlos's thing, he keeps having these moments where, the first time you see him, whatever, you see him shoot that dude in the prison cell, you have no idea. Like, you just started the game. You're like, okay, I got. Are you in? Or are you out? Like, sure, let's see what happens next. The second time he's in there, he's in this police station, and it's flooded. It's in first person. I think that's one of those ones, like, if you have mouse and keyboard, that's the way it's meant to be played. It doesn't really work so well in the controller. But the upside is you don't have to do any, like, shooting or anything like that.
Yeah.
You dodge one, like, shark-like monster thing, and that's it. You're just up there solving some puzzles and so on like that and trying to figure it out. But it doesn't really answer exactly what Carlos is doing till like that third scene where you see that, like, oh, he's marking off the days on the calendar, and he just keeps having this like Groundhog Day repeat of everything, and each day ends with him going to shoot that dude in the prison cell, and that guy keeps mutating more and more and more throughout it.
Right. Yeah, and because again, like, I mean, we could go section by section. I think that if anybody is going to play this game, like, you'll get through it. So outside of like the challenge of puzzles, like, I think that people will get through this game fairly quickly. So I think the floor is open at this point for spoilers. The way that I read, so you mentioned, so there's Roman, there's Carlos, there's Jill, and then there's Freya. And and these are like the four core pillars of the game in terms of characters and whatnot. As we're progressing, the way the levels are designed and the things that we see within them and whatnot, very obviously are Roman's trauma. It's a psyche, like, projecting into his, like, what he's envisioning, like, subconsciously, basically, of his traumas that have occurred and whatnot. And this is him basically, like, just trying to, I don't know, forgive himself, let go of the past, like, it's like one of those types of stories, really, where it's just like, clear yourself, cleanse yourself, like, be okay with the things that you've done and the things that you've seen, whatnot, and all that. I think that each character, and this is where our opinions may differ, because I think this is wholly up to interpretation. I started thinking of each of those characters as a character trait of Roman. So Jill is like a very angry, pissed, constant, just like anger, like the emotion anger. Freya is very much about, like the fracturing of, like, or disassociation, more or less, like Freya's essential story is that, like, she might have helped a girl in her school kill herself, is like the way that I interpreted that and the way I saw that and whatnot. So this is like the psyche of your own mind of, like, disassociation, breaking yourself away from that mold, not being a part of that situation, like, knowing that you probably did something wrong, but that, whereas Carlos is like very much, I can't really put, like, in terms of those two characters leading into Carlos, like, I can't really put a pin on, like, what emotion or, like, what psyche he really is. But I feel like he's, like, kind of like the mastermind of Roman's subconscious that is bringing him into this place called the Gloom and forcing Roman to deal with his past, more or less, and to forgive himself. So, like, think of it like probably the best analogy I can give is, like, like in Left 4 Dead, how there's, like, the director that, like, is constantly controlling everything. Like, that's what I think of Carlos. Like, Carlos is like the director of Roman's psyche, and he's dragging him through this. I think that the Carlos going in and killing the man over and over and over, and, like, the purgatory, like, Groundhog Day, just recurring cycles of, like, the same thing over and over, is Roman's psyche basically going through trauma. Like, I genuinely feel Roman killed somebody at some point, and he's trying to get over that trauma of that. So again, the anger side of it with Jill is just an emotion in the back of his head. Carlos being like, you know, like the provocateur of like, you're going to experience this over and over and over until you get over it. Freya being the disassociation of the event, you know, like not really wanting to deal with it and like communicating through a cell phone and things like that, you know, like that's kind of the way that I perceive like the totality of this game. And then for, you know, towards the end, you know, when we meet the king, so the king is like just there was such a random scene, dude, that blew my mind. The king is just like, he's just like some random like Mesopotamian fucking, you know, like old Aztec fucking king in these like ancient ruins and whatnot, and he's just like, to cleanse yourself you must, you know, like find another and, you know, make do and like exonerate yourself and blah 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 and enter the fray and yada yada. So, you know, and we'll get into the endings too, but like my first ending of like Roman and Freya basically like forgiving each other for the things that they've done and the things they've seen and, you know, said and whatnot, and then being able to finally exit this realm and whatnot, I thought was super cool. We can get a bit deeper into like the individual side of all that, but that's more or less kind of the way that I perceive the game, is just like raw emotions is what all those characters were in Roman's subconscious.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I actually didn't even think of it like that when I was playing it. I thought of it like for some reason they were in some kind of purgatory thing, and of course Roman being the main person, and then these other. I felt like there were all three different people trapped in there, and I was trying to piece together like what happened. And my theory was, I'm not saying it's anything that, you know, is set in stone, but I kind of wondered, because Roman is a subway driver, I pictured that he actually crashed that subway and it killed a lot of people, and that's why there's a lot of darkness and gloom all in here. And I kind of assumed that like this whole world was actually made up of all the people that died in that train crash. You know, and that's how I sort of looked at it. And some of these other things where it's like maybe they were tied into it, these other people too, that like maybe they weren't even like, you know, like Freya, because you take Freya and, you know, she talks about like, you know, there was this girl in school that died, and, you know, it kind of goes back and forth like, you know, could she have saved her? Was there other people involved that were doing it? Like, I don't think it was necessarily, you know, it wasn't like first degree murder. It was the fact that I think she had the ability to save her or to do something about it, and she chose not to because she was scared. Yeah. And that's kind of like her thing there. And I'm assuming she's mute and she just talks to the phone that way. It's either that or she's just really antisocial. I wasn't too sure, you know, because she literally talks through it like with like Microsoft Sam type voice and whatnot. Well, you know, and goes that way. But so I kind of wondered there, and you know, there's so many other things, because even like the Jill too, then you kind of wonder, Jill, like what's the you know, seems like there's definitely this connection that she's angry enough at Roman and so on, like he did kill somebody that you know, she knew, or, you know, in the process, but nothing, none of this is ever explained. You just kind of you start getting your own thoughts as you're playing through it and whatnot, you know, and how it kind of goes, you know, and even that like we were talking about, like when they find like the when they have that almost like temple like ruin area, which really, once again, that reminded me of like Alone in the Dark at the very end of the New Nightmare. 100%. That last level, I was like, this is what it's starting to feel like. But you have that there, and the dude's talking about like, you know, as long as like two can forgive, then that, you know, they can kind of go. And it kind of reminds me like one of those ones where, I guess if you are kind of jumping to the ending, because that's kind of how this game is, you know, you kind of could jump around a bit. But you do have, well, there's two endings. There's like sort of like an A ending and a B ending, and I really think that the B ending is supposed to be the good ending. The A ending's kind of like the not the bad ending, but not the right ending, you know. And
well, it's left open. It's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, and I got the B ending. I never got the A one, but I did see that one on there. I didn't know if I like. I don't want to do that boss battle at the end again, because that boss battle was well, once I figured it out, I was totally overthinking it, so I was getting really frustrated with it. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, that's that stupid little like, you know, mushroom guy that you have to get killed on the button. He doesn't have to be on the button closest. He only has to be on the button farthest. I was trying to get him to land on that button closest, and I could not get him to land on there to save my life without that giant penis monster slapping me every single time. Yep. You know, because I will say this, even just boss battle wise in this game, there's only about 3 or 4 of them in here. And they range from being extremely hard to being like, oh, there's like a corner I can stand in and it can't get me, you know? Because even there's like, I guess you said the first one's the dude with the big sword and whatnot. Yeah. Well, the first main, I guess there might be something before that, but that's the first one that feels like a legitimate boss battle.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I was trying to run around this guy, trying to, so I was like, all it's going to take is one hit with him and you're pretty much dead. Like, forget it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Until I realized I could go behind the table and he couldn't get to me.
Yep.
And I could fire off my shotgun that, will Tucker Roman out after 2 shots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, combat 100%. It's this game's weakest link. I don't think it works like hardly at all. Especially like its dodge mechanic. Like once I got used to the dodge mechanic, it was okay. Like I was at least understanding it. The problem is the omnidirectional movement. So you have this singular button that makes Roman jump backwards, basically, and depending on which, again, because camera angles are flipping back and forth and whatnot, like depending on which direction Roman is facing per the camera angle, like whichever direction he's facing, he's always going to jump backwards. So in combat, like one, it's hard to tell depth anyways because of camera angles and all that. So you do like big old swings and you just straight up miss where you think you're going to hit or whatever. And then, okay, now the monster is going to attack me. I need to take a step back. How do I do it? Hit the B button. Bam, you jump backwards. But inevitably what's happening is like, because camera angles are switching around so much, I'm constantly trying to maneuver my left thumbstick to get Roman to move around. And like, inevitably I'm jumping backwards into the monster over and over and over and over. Oh, it was so frustrating.
Yeah, I pretty much gave up on the dodge mechanic in this game. It kind of just put me in bad situations more often than not.
Yeah.
And I was just better off just to turn around and run away and then come back and swing again. Because a lot of monsters in this game, you pretty much fight by just clubbing to death. Yeah. You just go over and you got to club the living daylights out. You got to hit them like 10, 12 times. So it's like 1, 2, run away. 1, 2, run away.
Yep.
And you kind of do that over and over for a few of the enemies at the kind of the beginning and so on like that. And it's not too big of a deal at first. You're like, whatever, as long as you kind of run away like every like 2 to 3 hits, you mostly don't get hit by their little attack and whatnot. But yeah, you still just gotta sit there just beating the living daylights out of them. I don't know why you have to hit them so many times. But
and like you were talking about with what I would consider the first boss fight is that like priest looking thing with the big spear and all that.
Yeah.
Because like you're in like it's weird because you're in a school in general, but like randomly in the middle of a school is like this chapel, like so you go into this chapel and you're like, and you go in, and again they're like just large mannequin looking things or whatever, and it's just like this like large looking priest, this massive spear like looking thing, like dagger spear thing. And that fight was probably the hardest out of all the fights, but even then, like I still just kind of just walked through that fight. Like it really wasn't that big a deal. Really the attacks to avoid, and this is where the dodge mechanic actually worked for me, is the monster would do like an overhead slam with that spear, and I would basically bait that attack because I knew that, like I knew that animation at that point, so like I would bait that attack, wait for it to raise its arms, and it's like, cool, now I can backstep, and then he does this little slam thing. I walk forward, I go smack, 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 wait for it, bait it again, backstep, smack, 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 smack. So like you said, it's very methodical, like it's not a challenge per se. It's just like, are the controls going to work with me on this fight? Like more or less, never really felt like I was in danger per se. Although like midway through chapter 2 or act 2, I guess this was in the hospital. Basically like when you first started encountering enemies, like more so, I wasn't gathering health packs proficiently. Like I wasn't finding them very much. And there was like one part of that game where I had to like physically like restart the act just because I got to a point where I like had like a hit or 2 left, and like had no idea what the rest of that act was going to be. So I was like, screw it, like I'll just restart. Got back to that point within 10 minutes, like was just able to sprint there or whatever, but yeah, I mean, so that boss fight was cool-ish. There's I think enemy design is something that we should touch on in general, but like that blob monster, like one of the very first monsters that you come across, it's got 2 legs, it has probably 6 or 7 arms jetting out of it. It's got this like, it's basically like its body is just like this like large blob of like almost like a water-filled balloon, you know, but it has these like really creepy teeth and like this like, you know, little eyeballs sticking out of it and shit. And it's, you know, in general, it's creepy. In practice and mechanically, like it's just super easy. You just walk up, you smack it a couple times, you walk away. You know, like I mean, you know, there's really like no challenge to this game. Easily just could have cut combat out of the game entirely, and I would have been wholly fine with it. You know, like.
Yeah, well, it's like it's there, or just like sometimes just make it sort of just like where you just go up and just club an enemy a couple times and call it a day. You know, because other than that though, it's like other than some of the boss ones, like what it said, like I guess because I was using the shotgun against that spear priest guy, and that shotgun fire is so goddamn slow that it just leaves you so open because you can't dodge after you shoot, and so that's where I realized I'm like if I run behind the table, I can just sit there and shoot him because I didn't use the guns on anything but the bosses in this game. Like I just savored them for that, and then you know that was it. And then even when you fight Jill later on, you know when she turns the giant spider thing, I ran to the corner and then I realized she never could get to me. I don't know what I was like. I just sat there and bam, 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 and then she finally died.
So in my experience in that fight, so you had texted me. So Spence got ahead of me at one point where he was like an act ahead of me or whatever. And I'm pretty sure you like had finished the game at this point because you text me. I was just coming out of Act 2, moving into Act 3, and you're just like, "Oh no, dude, that fucking boss! Like, you know, don't want you know, like that was a pain in my ass and blah blah blah." I'm thinking that, but when I got to that point, when I'm fighting Jill, I'm thinking that's the fight you're talking about because like I walked through that fight, dude. She does this like. She gets up on all of her little spider legs or whatever, and then she like raises her head up and she like slams it down on the ground or whatever, or like you know with a hand. Bro, like if you just walk Roman into that hand that's lifting up, she will miss you every single time because you just go right underneath the arm, and then you're on her armpit and you just go smack, 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 you know, and then she like raises her head up again, keep walking that way, just right it through her armpit again, you know, like so. And like I remember getting through that fight and I was like, are you talking about Jill? I'm like, because that was stupid easy. Like, what are you talking about? You know? Oh no, it comes later. I'm like, okay,
no, not Jill. Because that was the same. Because all I did, I ran to the corner and I just started firing, and then like she never could get to me. Like, so then none of the attacks were ever got close. So I was just like, oh, okay. And then I unloaded maybe 9 rounds of pistol, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. The final fight though. So I walked into that. So it basically like towards the end of the game, we're finding out through Carlos's story and notes and things like that there's the monster that he is killing over and over again is a dude named Henry, basically. And I don't particularly know exactly what Henry is or what he's supposed to be or whatever. Like in general, he's a human and we're killing him over and over and over in this Groundhog Day type thing. But inevitably, this thing turns into what's referred to as the abomination, you know, or whatever. And hey, out of here, please. Go. And walking into that fight towards the end of the game, so this like large. I don't even know how to describe this thing, dude. Like it's like a tentacle, basically. It's just like this circular thing in the middle of the ground, and like this large tentacle-looking thing coming up. Swirling around.
It's the giant penis monster. That's just what I felt like. And it slams down on you if you get caught. Because, you know, Roman's only got so much, like, you know, stamina to run past this thing.
Yeah. So what's cool about the fight in some regard is like there are a little bit of mechanics here. You're playing as Roman, but you can also switch to Freya. She's way up top, like on these like I don't know, basically like controls, you know, type thing. Roman's down on the ground with this monster, and it's just flopping its head around, you know, slamming on the ground over and over. And basically, like, Roman can pull levers, and the little girl can, like, hit buttons or whatever. And in the arena that the monster's in are, like, these, like, large rings. And you're supposed to line the rings up, you know, to kill it, basically. I didn't quite understand what I was really doing. Like, what does lining up these rings really have to do with anything, you know? Because, like, if you bring Roman off of where it can hit you and you're just, like, in those areas where the levers are or whatever, like, it just straight up can't hit you, you know? And, like, okay, so, like, I'm, like, spinning these rings around and whatnot. And then I noticed the buttons. You mentioned the buttons earlier, you know, like, when in this fight. there's a button that's like right next to the monster, a good 15 feet away from it, and then there's a button that's outside of its realm of where it can actually hit, or maybe like close to or whatever. And if you step on one of the button on the far end, nothing happens. But you step on the button on the closer end or whatever, it spawns like a random monster. You know, I just took it because I stepped on that one close to the monster, and then a mob spawned, and then it's like chasing me around or whatever. I'm like, oh, I must need to bring it over to the other one, you know, the other button on the ground. So I, you know, bring it over and whatnot. Meanwhile, like big old floppy dick's like slamming its head down over and over again, you know, like, so you're having to avoid the monster that's flopping around to hit the mob that you're trying to kite over to the other button, so you can kill it on that button, so it can land on it, put some weight on it, and then you can do your next puzzle piece, or, you know, like that first try, you know, like, I mean, so I'm curious to see like how you overthought that, really, because it's like
I thought you had to get the little monster you spawn, the little mushroom looking creature that comes out. I thought you had to get him to die on that button closest to there, as well as getting somebody on that far one, because I didn't think that for some reason. I must have, like, when I first did it, like, I thought the gate didn't stay open, like if I hit that one, got the mushroom guy on the far one, and then went back and hit the other one, I didn't think it would stay open, you know, if I ran away from it. Like, that's how I was looking at it. Like, it was one of those ones that there had to be weight on both of them so that the gate could open. So I was like so I was like, I gotta get it there. And so I kept retrying to try to get that one there on the bottom, and like I would end up getting smash over and over and over. I was like, gosh, just can't get it there. Or I'd get close, and then that creature would die like on the side of it and be like, you stupid bastard.
Yeah.
You know, the far end one's not a problem because you just wait for him. Second he comes by, you club him. There you go. Yep, he's on there. Cool.
Easy.
Wait for the thing to slam, go hit the other button, and then, oh, lo and behold, that gate stays open.
yeah, exactly. And like, you know, so my first ending that I got was quote unquote the good ending. It was ending B. And I guess that the way that this is differentiated, because I went back and I got ending A or whatever, is like directly leading into that last area with the boss fight that we're talking about and whatnot. Roman and Freya are back so eventually you end up back in the train station. You end up back on a train or whatever, and then like you're like heading to the end of the game. You're heading towards the exit, you know, of Roman's psyche, basically. And Jill appears in that scene, and like she comes down, she's in her spider form and all that, and she's more or less like just bashing her head into the front windows of the train, like trying to get in to you and whatnot. If you speed up and you like quote unquote kill her, like smash her into the wall or whatever at the end, she doesn't appear at the end of the game. Whereas if you slow the train down and don't kill her in that one scene, then you get ending B. And that's like quite literally the fork in the road. Is just those two options right there. So really, if you ever did want to go back and get ending A, like, you just like revert back to that save and there you go, and then just do that boss fight real quick and you're done. You know, like that's what I did. You know.
I did look that up because like, oh yeah, so that's what you gotta do is just not hit her in there and so on, like, or you know, or hit her and then you can get the ending A, and so on like that. Speaking of which, I gotta say this: when there was a part in the beforehand where you get to drive the train for the first time, and I crashed that straight into the wall because I was just like, okay, we're cruising, and then all of a sudden a wall appears. It's like, oh, maybe you just bust through that. Nope. Yep. Went straight in that wall at full speed. Yeah. Did not realize I had to stop it there.
Yep. Yeah, so in ending A, you spin the discs around or whatever, and good old floppy dick just kind of just dies. Like, like I don't know what spinning those things were, but you know, it just dies, and then it kind of fades to black, and then you hear this ominous voice just go, Roman, it's time, you know, and then it fades to black, and then it's credits, and it's like, you know, so that leaves it open to interpretation that like Roman didn't make it out, you know, more or less. He never exited, you know, out of the gloom. Whereas ending B, and this is so the good one, it conflicts with my theory about what these characters are, you know, Roman psyche and whatnot, to an extent. And this is where I'm like super confused about the game in general, because I really don't know what this game's about. But So in ending B, if you spare Jill in the train scene, she appears at the very end. So once you spin the little discs and all that, and the monster, quote unquote, is dying, she climbs up on the roof. She just kind of appears out of the roof or whatever and jumps on this like large spiked like chandelier looking thing or whatever, and it falls down on top of the mob, killing it basically. And then that's where Roman and Freya have their little scene of like holding hands and forgiving each other and jumping through the light to escape the gloom and blah blah blah. What's really conflicting for me is like, okay, so in my opinion, Jill is the vessel of hatred essentially for Roman in his psyche. Is Henry the abomination? Is Henry like the core of Roman's trauma, in that he uses anger to defeat trauma and then finally be able to exonerate himself and forgive himself, and basically marriage with disassociation, telling Carlos essentially like that side of his psyche, like, see ya, I'm gone, you no longer control me, and then exits out the light. I can kind of see it that way, but like, again, I don't really know. Like, I think I'm thinking about it too hard or whatever, but like, but I think he uses his anger to finally like destroy his trauma, and I think Henry is the source of his trauma.
Yeah, Henry is the source of everything. It just continuously keeps building and growing and growing and growing. And no matter, by the Carlos's standards, no matter how many times he tries to rid it, it just appears, and it appears bigger, every single time. That definitely could be something like that, because it's like, in a sense, according to like the king dude at the very end, as long as with both Roman and Freya, if they can kind of accept their in a sense tragedies, and forgive, and be able to tell somebody else about it, then they can go into the light and so on, which is what gives them the super, I guess, the good ending of I don't want to say the super happy end of number B, but same thing with like Freya being able to forgive that, like the fact that like she makes it feel like it's her fault that girl killed herself, when realistically maybe she could have done something, but at the end of the day, that's it was going to happen no matter what, probably. What I mean? It's, you can't be blaming yourself for those incidents and so on. Yeah.
No, I like your concept of like multiple people's traumas in the same thing, and I think you said it beautifully earlier, because like now I'm actually considering this too. Like, yeah, what if Roman was the train conductor that got a ton of people killed, and all of their trauma, all of their, thoughts and ambitions and things like all culminate into this place called the Gloom. And it's Roman dealing with his own personal traumas and dealing with others' traumas as well. I think is a very interesting concept. And I'd be again, and that's kind of the thing with this game that really saves it for me, to where I'd say that if you're a fan of psychological horror, you're a fan of puzzles, you're a fan of like thought-provoking style games, like this is definitely one of them. Like even at its full price, like I would wholly say, like, just for its story and just to kind of like see exactly what we're talking about, because this game is like nearly impossible to explain verbally. Like you almost have to play it to understand. But at the same time, I also think that with its core jankiness, it's like it's rough around the edges. That's like the best way I can put it. It's like I can't fully recommend this like wholeheartedly to most people, But again, if you want a thought-provoking experience that'll make you like really make your head turn, and like, I mean, just listen to my opinion and theories about the game versus yours. I mean, like, we played it at the same time right around lunch, and have like these vastly different outcomes. I love these types of games that leaves it up to the player's interpretation, and it doesn't just outright spell it.
And I think that is the cool thing about it, because this is one of those games, I will say, the more I think about it, the more I kind of do like a lot of the things in it. It's not that I walked away being like, oh man, that game sucked or anything like that. It's like, no. It just has that rough around the edges. It has the kind of janky controls and so on like that. And it's that weird one though. But like, if you take the positives is that the story is interesting and it's cool, and it's just like that thing of like making you really think of like, how do all these characters kind of, and I feel like it's one of those ones, if you if anyone so desired to play this game multiple times over, I feel like you would actually get more and more ideas of how you think it sort of goes too. The more you kind of went into it, and the more you kind of, because you do get notes and you do get all that other kind of stuff too, that a lot of times in one playthrough might not be enough to have it fully sink in. You're trying to piece it together, but you know how that kind of goes. It's like sometimes there's ideas that even come like even games later on. It's like, man, it's like the third or fourth time I played this game, and I never thought about this, and that, or there's a note that stood out to me more. I could definitely see that with this game. And it really, once again, $15, this game is literally a steal. This day and age, like, I hate to sort of say it, $15 is like the new $5.
Oh yeah, yeah. 100%,
like that's you could pretty much just throw that away, and it's just like, I mean, like, you're not out anything. If this game was like 30 plus or something like that, which so many other games do charge that, so I actually give it credit for not going that distance. Yeah, no, you are getting something kind of neat, and there is just something kind of cool. And once again, I think Roman's a very interesting character. You don't see something like that, normally in a survival horror.
Oh yeah,
it's close thing that would be like Barry Burton, but Barry Burton's a gun expert and and the stars and so on. So I don't know, how, he's got a lot of stuff over that. So to see this guy go through his midlife crisis of whatever the hell happened,
right.
And having to deal with it, with all the his inner demons and so on, and whether that be other people or these people are part of his psyche and so on. There's a lot to unpack here, and I think that's what makes it kind of a cool experience.
Yeah. I think walking out of this game upon completion, seeing credits for the first time, and then like sitting there watching credits, just like really trying to wrap my head around what the fuck I just experienced, over the last 6 hours of my life. I walked out of this game at like a 5 out of 10. I was like, it's okay. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but blah, blah, blah. However, due to scheduling conflicts that you and I have had, we've had roughly about a week's period of finishing the game to talking about it. And I'm actually really glad that happened, because over the course of the last week, I have been thinking about this game nearly daily, really trying to like, what is this game really about? And it's rare when a game like does that to me, to where like, I don't need the total answer. I really don't. And I'm so glad that I didn't tell you anything about my thoughts about like what this game was leading up to this, because I knew that we were going to have core differences. And if we came up with the same thing, like even better, because like then it tells me that the direction of this game was like very, very well solid. But again, rough around the edges and kind of like shaky in terms of like what I truly feel about this game. But I think at the end of the day, this is a 7 out of 10 experience. I think that if I were to play it again in the future, I will probably gain more so out of it, having these background thoughts and knowledge, of like what the game is. I can pay attention quite a bit more into the notes and the, like random things you find throughout the environment and all that. This isn't a game of the year, go buy it, go play right now. But this is hey, if you got the time and you're into this type of genre, totally 100% play it. Buy it at full cost. If you think you're interested in it, or like want an experience that like it's just going to take you 5 or 6 hours, and but you don't want to spend a ton of money on it, just wait on a sale. Like throw this game in your wish list and like buy it at like $5, because like I think it's totally worth it at that point. And I'd be curious to see like, again, like going back to it in like 2 years and just like kind of formulating like those thoughts. Hopefully there's a lot more information out about the game. There's a lot more theory crafting. There's a whole lot, like more things like that will occur over time, because again, this game is very brand new. It just came out, like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that, so. Yeah.
Well, and then I also do kind of wonder, is this is one of those games that like, in a handful of months from now, they might actually have it a little bit more dialed in. It might be playing a little bit smoother. The controls might be a little bit more dialed in. They might even get just some of like that, the kind of hit boxes and so on like that, like a little bit more trimmed and so on. So it could actually become quite a, a couple points higher up in experience, with a little bit of updates and improvements and so on. So I could totally see that. And it kind of leaves me going like, if these guys create another game in the similar style, I would actually look forward to seeing what it kind of was, because I feel that's going to be even more dialed in anyways. So, and this one just leaves me with it is a cool story and a cool experience. It's not one of those ones where, sometimes there's certain games or like it's like even like movies and so on like that you can kind of go, you just kind of look and go, they're just trying, it's just this kind of knockoff, and you know, and you just kind of get that kind of feel and so on. Where this one still, it's like, yeah, it definitely is a little bit more in the Silent Hill kind of knockoffness of it, but I still think there's a lot of cool stuff in there that does make it worthwhile. You just have to be really into survival horror games. Yeah. I feel it's just one of those ones you can't be casually into it because it might not be your thing. I don't know, who knows? Maybe you could, but you know, I feel like it's just the smoothness might turn somebody off from the genre. You know. Yeah.
Or if you're really, really into puzzles, like this game has some really thought-provoking and challenging puzzles.
We didn't even mention, but there's just like a quick overview of some of those ones there. I mean, there's a puzzle where it literally wants you to pretty much memorize a metronome beats, which I just wrote down my notes. Wait. This one goes slow. This one's at a mid-tempo. This one's fast. That was all idea. I'm like, I'm not gonna sit here and count the beats out. But that's how I wrote them down. And lo and behold, that worked when I went to go do the metronome puzzle. But or there's one too where you have to do math for a high school basketball game and so on like that, and how many fouls, did Jimmy have, and how many, all this kind of stuff there. And so there's some cool stuff in there, which, once again, that always reminds me of like, Silent Hills type stuff. But the nice thing I'll say about these puzzles is all these puzzles, once again, the information's all there. It's not like, I remember in Silent Hill 3, and it's right at the very beginning of the game, there's literally a Shakespeare puzzle. So good luck if you don't know Shakespeare. Like you know what I mean? Like there's some of those kind of puzzles where it's like that, where you're like, give me the guide. I'm just gonna get past it. Where this one here, I use the guide a little bit just to get me from room to room, just like for that necessariness, because there's no map in this game. I mean, except for you'll see a map on the wall, you take a picture of it with your camera, and so I have my phone in one hand looking at it as the map, then I'd have to go, okay, I've kind of got turned around, oh, okay, I got to go to this room here, okay, cool. But when it came to puzzles, I just put it down and like I was just like, let's just go for it. And other than maybe having to do them a couple times to try to figure it out, like I felt like they were still pretty much, they never stumped me so bad where you're just like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, they gave you enough clues, they gave you enough things you can kind of try, and at the very end, if you kind of got it maybe halfway there, you could kind of just bully it through, and maybe you'll find the right number.
Right. So to comment quickly, the puzzle that I enjoyed the absolute most is when you're in the school and you go to the janitor's closet and there's the electrical panel on the wall and it's flashing like you don't. I didn't recognize this right off the get-go, and this is the theme with a lot of these puzzles in this game. So I walk into this room and I didn't recognize it right off the get-go, but the panel is flashing colors in very set sequences, and it took me a minute to figure that one out, for I fully understood it. And then it took me even longer. So it's like, so I write that down. It's like red, blue, yellow, green, whatever, like whatever the sequence is. And then a little while later, I enter into a hallway and I open up a door and it, does the loading animation or whatever. I walk into this hallway and all of a sudden there's like a green door, a red door, and a blue door, and I'm like, what? I walk into the red door and then it like pops me back out into that hallway. Then it's still a red door, a green door, and a blue door. And I'm like, okay, I go through the blue door, go through the red door, go through the green door, go through the, like I'm just trying things just over and over. And I'm just like ending up in the same place over and over again. What the fuck? And I like go back through and I walk around and I'm just aimlessly wandering or whatever. Finally end up back in that janitor's closet. And then I notice the colors at that point. I'm like, oh, it's red, green, blue, yellow, red, green, whatever.
Yep.
And then figuring out the puzzle that way, like that type of organic player, like recognition, using environmental design, it's not holding your hand. It's not telling you what to do. It's not doing any of these things, but it's like blatantly apparent right in front of you. Majority of the puzzles are like that in this game. So yes, upon first interaction, you're going to get stumped. I guarantee it. But, give it a little bit of thought, think about what you're really looking at, and more often than not, like I think I had to use the guide like probably like 2 times, I think, throughout, like to help me finish a puzzle anyways. So
yeah, that was the one that reminded me of like Simon from like the 70s game or whatever, of like the code memorization. That was the first thing I thought, like, oh, it's a Simon puzzle. that. And the one thing I also give another credit to is I like, because there's not that many enemies in the game, like, because that's the thing that can be kind of annoying is if you have a bunch of puzzles to do and you need to be running back and forth and there's stupid enemies just in your way, like that can kind of ruin it too. I like how that, like, enemies never respawn. The few enemies that there is, you just club them over the head. I mean, you could probably run past them, I guess, but I felt like it was just easy enough that you could kill them and get them out of your way, and then you could like just focus on solving your puzzles and getting your keys and all that kind of stuff. And because sometimes there's nothing worse than like a game where you're trying to solve a puzzle and there's like somebody just following you around the whole time. Yeah. And it's like, I always feel like a lot of times that's not scary. It's more just annoying. It's like, oh, here's this guy again. Okay, let me go run around the room so he gets lost, and then I'll come back and try to finish this. Yeah, like that to me is always really like it's like that's
Except
not scary.
One comment. And I text you about this when it was happening, and it's in the school scene, and it's like you get through that fight with that mannequin with the big sword fucking thing, whatever, the spear.
Oh yeah.
And it in its cutscene after it, like it dies or whatever, like in its cutscene it knocks out Roman, and then you get to play as Freya. That would have been, if you're gonna do a chase scene, that would have been it. Because Freya has no weapons. She's not, like, she doesn't really have anything other than her cell phone and a light, and like, why not? Like, why not have used that? If you're already playing into the Silent Hill themes and you're robbing from this game and that and the other, like, throw in the Nemesis character in that particular scene just to add more tension, because inevitably what happened during that scene is like, there's still tension within its atmosphere and like walking around these dark hallways and things like that, of course. But not having any real physical threats, like, really didn't amount to much of anything. It was just like you're just kind of wandering around until you figure out the puzzle to open up the nurse's nurse's room to grab the smelling salts to go wake up Roman, and then you just right back over to Roman again, and it was like, it just felt like a waste, like, so.
Well, that's like what I was supposed to like at the end of the day, you probably could just went and got a glass of water and threw it on his face.
Exactly. Just smack him up a bit,
Yeah, like, cause not only you got to go, because I think, doesn't Freya do the metronome puzzle? And she has to do the basketball puzzle. Like, so you have to go through all this just to get literally the smelling. So it's kind of actually funny when you think about it like that. Oh, yeah. But you almost could, because there is nothing there you fight. Because that was one thing I kind of wondered the whole time. Like, is there gonna be like those? Because there were some of those ghost creatures. I don't know what the heck you want to call them, but like, they're not they were there with Roman in the same rooms and so on. And I killed every single one of them. So I don't know. Maybe they'd be there if I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But there is nothing there. But yeah, it depends. I don't mind if Freya was just running around maybe collecting stuff, be fine. If I was sitting there trying to do a math equation and there's something chasing me around, that might be a little bit annoying.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I go, let me go chase this bastard out of the fucking basketball room again, and let's try this one more time, But you almost could, and I don't think they'd be too out of the way. Like, in a sense, I don't mind when there's like those monsters chasing you and it's kind of a glorified like track in a sense.
Yeah.
I'll use the example as Resident Evil 3, the remake with Nemesis. Like, because whenever Nemesis appears, it's actually more just like a track. And I kind of like, other than maybe like one scene early on, most of the part you just have to get from point A to point B, and there you go. And so just don't get stuck is about all. And that's fine, because at least you're not trying to solve a puzzle or anything like that. Or trying.
Well, let's see, and they could have done that with Freya too, because like as you're playing as Roman throughout the totality of the school scene, you're seeing all these like cracks in the walls and whatnot that Roman's just fat ass just can't get through. So like of course so like as Freya, but like what I'm saying is like as soon as you get out of that chapel and you're in that really long hallway, why not just toss the enemy at you and have it chase until you get to that hole in the wall,
Yeah,
and then
just a little bit of dread, just a little bit there, and it's not like it's getting in the way of your puzzle solving or anything like that.
Well, exactly.
It's just kind of keeping you on your toes a bit,
Yeah.
No, that would have been kind of cool, because there is literally nothing there for her, But yeah, like overall, like as I said, the more I think about this game too, I feel like I'm kind of like you, how he said, like since we were going to do this podcast like a week and a half ago, and just like as things kind of got delayed a bit, but like it did give us a little bit more time to stew on this game a bit, and and the more I do think about it, the more I actually do kind of like it. When I initially kind of beat it, I would have said, I would have been like, middle of the road. That's probably how I kind of felt about it. Like, not a bad game, but not really a great one. But the more I think about it, like there is a lot of cool stuff in here, that it's just held back slightly by really if the controls if they just got good tank controls. I could probably bypass a whole lot of the other stuff and be like, yeah, I'm kind of cool with this. I think that's just like one of the only things it really kind of needs to have. I know on my PC it made it run kind of funny because sometimes I don't know what it is. Sometimes indie games they'll run like so hard, and my mic is just whirring and going to the point that like when I crashed that train, like I literally crashed that train into the wall. My entire computer crashed with it too. It was everything went kaput right at once, and I was like, the game could not handle that.
Post traumaed you out.
I was like, I guess I'm done for the night. That was all I thought. I'll get back to this tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's like one more just real brief comment that I'll make. I don't think that it's particularly the game's fault per se. Unreal Engine 5 is what this game is developed in, and there's just a lot of weird jankiness with Unreal Engine 5 in general. Even your top tier developers out there still have problems with hitching and, frame drops and things like that within Unreal. So I'm not going to bash on an indie studio for that type of stuff. There's actually some really hilarious things that happen within Unreal Engine 5, especially with this game, like Roman is like, again, like an older Japanese gentleman, and he has like semi kind of longer hair, and he has like a mustache and like a little bit of a beard and whatnot. Bro, there's so many scenes where like Roman is like, like the bathroom scene, for example, where the phone's ringing in the bathroom, and he's standing there just like all scared, and there's like this red light on him, and it's like very atmospheric and spooky looking, and like this random phone's ringing or whatever, but his beard is just like flowing in the wind, and there's no wind in there, but it's just like flickering, and like it just makes me laugh every time, So, and there's just a lot of stuff like that within its like like cloth materials, and like I said, like hair is very much like that, and just like there's just random like materials in the world that just weren't very well optimized. But it brings a hilarious effect that I'll give it a half a point for that. So.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, as long as the game still plays fine, like I don't really mind like any of that kind of goofiness, because sometimes that does just make it fun in like other ways. Like I love the occasional glitch that doesn't like block your gameplay or anything like that. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and other than that, though, like for the most part, I did kind of wonder because this game came out on Xbox and PlayStation as well. I didn't realize it would have came out that fast on. I would have thought it would have been a Steam game. 6 months later, it would have came out on other stuff. But they released it on everything right out of the way, so it made me wonder how well it ran like on the consoles, just out of curiosity. Because it felt like it was like it had that kind of like early access feel on PC, and I didn't know if it was just my PC being older too. Because I said it made my PC just start cranking its fans whenever this game's on. I do notice that happens a lot with a lot of indie games though, where I know it's like they run like 3 times harder than like a big company game will, because they're just, I think there's a lot of times there's not nearly as they're not as optimized for the most part. Same thing. It's like when you get an indie game and like the game has like 60 gig download, and you're like, dude, the game's like a 2D game. Like what did you do wrong? Right, exactly. Can't compress. Yeah. So but yeah, as I said, the more we've been talking about, even just here on the podcast, I do kind of like the experience a little bit more than I even initially thought, and even just throughout it. So, for $15, once again, that's next to nothing for a brand new game. Let alone if this game goes on sale, it's like, if you just want just a fun little extra survival horror experience, by all means, it's well worth it. For the fact that you can also grab it on PlayStation or Xbox too. Yeah. So it'll probably be on Switch pretty darn soon for Switch too, if I had to guess. Yeah, exactly. So it'll be everywhere, and I kind of look forward just to seeing what more of these guys will put together as far as survival horrors go, because we are kind of in a cool like golden age of indie survival horror games. I will say, it's 100%. Like there was a period. It seemed like maybe like 8 years ago or something like that. Like there was just like a few games that came out, and I was like, wow, this is actually cool. Like there's like nobody's doing this. Like they're making it look like Resident Evil 1 and all this kind of stuff. And now we're getting so many of them that there's almost not even enough time to keep up with them. Well, exactly. A lot of them look great, and and so on that. And now I think the bar is also kind of nicely raised too. So I feel like before, somebody can throw out kind of something pretty darn janky, and you just be grateful that someone was making something in that style. But now I feel like everybody's kind of competing with each other. So now it's like, it's got to be pretty darn good though. Can't just release anything, So, as I said, this one, give it a try if you feel like it. But at the same time, I mean, if if you never played any Silent Hill yet, probably should start there first and foremost.
Pick up Silent Hill first for sure.
There's some other ones, but yeah, no, I was glad we did this. It was something different, and then the nice thing about doing a podcast on it is that this would have been one of those games that maybe if I played it if I just would have bought this and just had it sitting there, I might have started it up, put a half an hour plus into it, and then been like, I might come back, and then maybe I probably never would. But since we did the podcast, it kind of forced us to go through it, which sometimes gives you a completely different appreciation for it, like when it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, any other final thoughts or anything you want on post trauma?
No, not necessarily. I think that this, yeah, I mean, not really. No, I mean, this game just kind of falls in line with I'm glad that we played it. I don't think I will play it again for a while. But again, it really does bring a lot of thoughts about what this game is and how it was designed and like what the overall tone and theme of it is. I really enjoy that aspect of it. I'd be really interested to look at this game again in 6 months, kind of see if there are any updates to it, see if they can tighten up those controls a bit, see if they can tighten down, like some of the weird, glitchiness of UE5 and whatnot, optimized, more or less. But no, I'm with you. I think in general, if you're a fan of the genre, been around a long time, have nothing new to play, 100% try this, give it a shot. I think it's cool. If you are new like myself, I don't think that I would have picked this game up on my own and played through it wholeheartedly. But now that I have, again, I think this historically throughout this podcast, I've been giving, number ratings at the end. And I genuinely feel this is like a good 7 out of 10. I think there's room for improvement. There's probably some, like you had mentioned, I'm really curious to see what this development studio does next. Because I think they have a really good core basis here. I think that they told the story well enough and left enough up to interpretation of the player that will continually have me thinking about this game for a while. So,
yeah, no, I definitely think so too. And once again, I just keep thinking about the price because I was just comparing to there's so many of those other indie games that will charge you 2 or 3 times more than this. Mm-hmm. But I feel this game probably delivers actually equivalent to that, at once again a fraction of the price that it's retail initiation. So yeah, no, overall I actually liked it more. I would have probably been like you, 5 out of 10 at the very beginning, but I would definitely I'd at least say like a 6.5, kind of pushing its way up there and so on like that. You don't maybe necessarily need to go out of your way and play it, but if you happen to run across it, there's definitely some stuff to take home.
Yeah. Yep.
But other than all that good stuff, you can always check out all the other podcasts and more fun stuff on YouTube and Spotify. Till then, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I am Cameron.
And we'll see you some other time.